So do you think that the stories can be improved? Like Greg, you said that these people. I love the face you make when I call on you. Do you think that? Do you think it would help if things happened during every issue? Like, do you feel like remember the Stray Bullets? Like you would read those, you'd get to the end and you were repulsed a little bit, but you couldn't wait for the next one. And rarely did they ever revisit the same characters in some cases. It
took a while.
They would just wait like 4 issues to come back to that storyline. But you couldn't wait for more. And I think that, but they were telling were they telling complete stories? In some ways they were.
I think they did.
I think in every case they were. They were,
There were a couple
they were
cliffhangers.
morality plays basically.
Right.
And each one kind of ended with each thing.
My wife and I are watching, I know I've talked to you guys about this, but we're watching The Lost show. We've never seen that before. But every episode, you get to the end, you can't wait for the next one. And they've got this diverse group of characters. They're in-depth, these in-depth backgrounds on these stories. They spoon-feed you complete stories. Like, why can't that happen in today's comics and still build to a larger vision, so that the trade market, which we know is going to be the new market eventually, like why can't it be like that? Like the Stray Bullets trades are great books.
I think it seems to me, in using the television example, that television is a highly structured medium. When you have you basically don't have one writer, you have a team of writers, and you have an executive producer who has a vision and also an eye to, towards ratings, and that, a significant dip in those ratings would mean, the show is gone, and he's got a budget, and, the way that scripts are written, they're written towards, every 15 minutes you got a break, so it's got to be, it's highly structured, highly, pieced together. I think the older era of comics had that kind of rigidity, and they knew that that's how they had to do it. I think the newer age, and I think I don't think there's any one model that's happening here. I mean, sometimes you have a limited series at 6 issues. Sometimes you have an ongoing book that follows a different model. I think that in a lot of ways, the creative freedom that the modern comic writers, and I think you're mostly talking writers because that's what's dictating the pace of the story, have a lot more leeway than any television writer would ever have, because there is no one television writer per show. It's formulaic, and it meets a rigid standard. It can't be 23 minutes. It's got to be 22 or whatever it is. A sitcom has got to have an A plot, B plot, C plot in every single episode for it to work. And so I think that because the comics is, the delivery system is, advanced ordering. It's not, I think these guys get contracts to do a certain amount of issues, whether they sell well, they don't sell well. It doesn't seem like that's a real consideration in whether a person keeps a job or not, how much they're actually selling. So I think they're, given those rules, given those parameters that they're given, there's a lot of experimentation going on. You can have a 2-issue arc one set and a 7-issue arc the next. And
do you really see that these days?
Absolutely. I think,
In the
I've seen it that
books?
way. Yeah. I don't think they're all, I think there was a time several years ago where it was all 6-issue chunks, but I don't necessarily see that anymore.
I see it, I read Spider-Man still, and it's very much like a large picture that the team is working for at the time, and then they're going to shift out. And I don't know if that's maybe because they do 2 or 3 issues a month, but they seem to have these clumps that they are telling, we even have examples of them here, New Ways to Die or Kraven's First Hunt. These guys will get that. These guys will get that opportunity, right here, and they still have this model in mind when they're telling those stories. And sometimes they'll keep it specific to that team. Other times, with the Marvel crossovers, if it's Siege or Secret Invasion or whatever, they're building these things still in these 6-issue chunks. I don't know about the DC side. I don't read DC. But for some reason, when I see these books, either at the grocery store or at the comic store, they have the title, and then there's a subtitle on it that says it's part of the Eclipso story or the X-Men, some sort of vampire story that they have going on. And they have a vision that they're spoon-feeding out to the public, and it is these little chunks. And I don't think they're... I think I'd like to see that rigidity come back. I think that they're... I don't know. I look back at and I'm not like a Fantastic Four like diehard fan, but I remember the value of reading that issue and knowing at the end, like Greg said, like something was gonna happen. Something was gonna happen. Instead of reading to the end and finding that something might happen, or something's almost gonna happen. Any final thoughts on this, guys?
Well, I think what you're talking about is a true serial, which
aren't comics that?
Well, they could be, they could not be. I mean, it depends what they consider their final product. I mean, you know, we grew up in an era where, yeah, all the books were serials. You know, Thor had its serial, and Fantastic Four was its one, and you had a main plot through the issue and 3 subplots that carried over to the next issue, and then a subplot would become a main plot, and on and on and on and on. That I don't think you see that at all anymore, and I think that's because of, number one, you mentioned the crossovers. I think that those things, you have, even if you're trying to do a straight up book, like, oh, by the way, now you have to include this Blackest Night stuff in your book, which often is just one issue for each title, but it kind of takes you out of the ability to do a true serial because you're throwing in this plot that you didn't really write, talking about that. But then, these collections, I think there is an eye towards collecting 6 issues or 7 issues, but I don't think they always do that altogether successfully. I've read collections.
I agree with that too.
I've read collections that end on cliffhangers, and I feel like, wow, I just spent $20 to not to have to spend another 20 if I even cared, and frankly, I didn't really care.
Yeah, I don't think today's cliffhanger is a true cliffhanger. I think it's crud. We ran out of story.
Yeah, it ran out of
I don't think it's
space.
structured to lead into get you excited to come back.
Well, the older books, getting back to what you were starting with, I don't think that they even presumed collectability. Like that you were
They
going
did.
to.
No.
And I remember as a kid, if I didn't particularly like a character or I didn't like an artist, I would not buy the next one. I would just open it when I got it and see. I don't care about the storyline. If the artist wasn't somebody I liked, I'd put it back and buy a different book that month.
Right.
So, maybe that was just me, but now there seems to be, people like this story arc and they're going to like this little subplot, so they're going to read this version and that version. That all started like in the 80s or something like that.
That's when I started reading.
And that was well, maybe it was more subtle back then, but to me, you got through the book and you got a kick at the end, or you got, if it was a cliffhanger, you at least got a big chunk of the story, and they worked hard at making.
And what's
Appreciate
interesting
that one book you have.
what's interesting about today is that the decision to buy the book usually happens 3 months before the book comes out. It comes by reading the advanced ordering guide, and so I think that plays into a lot of, when you're basically making the decision to spend the money on that book before it even comes out, like it's almost like that paragraph blurb has got to say something that's going to make you keep wanting to buy it.
Are you doing the same thing? You look and say, "Oh, I like this writer. I like this."
Yeah,
artist."
I think that
Give you a little
absolutely.
glimpse of what's coming.
I had no idea when I first started reading comics who the writer or the artist was. Mm-hmm. I could tell. Oh, I like this style, or I like this, but very little as a kid. Very little idea of who was writing what. I bought for character more than anything.
Are they introducing you to the newcomers through the previews and that sort of stuff?
The newcomer
creators.
artists.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do features on them,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know too much. Like I think with Marvel they do the Young Guns kind of thing. They'll give them a plug as a new talent, but it doesn't go much deeper than that. Guys, this was a great topic, and I think we're going to have to resurrect this one at a future time. So thanks a lot. I'm going to sign off. I want to thank Greg and Steve, Rachel and Brad and Jeff, who's not here, and Mason behind the camera. And check us out next week. Who did I say behind the camera? Did I say Greg or Mason?
He's
said
amazing.
Mason.
And
Okay.
he waved. That's
He just
why.
waved.
Oh, he
to
waved.
That's
himself.
why we laughed.
Hello.
It's
All
amazing.
right. Cool. Well, thanks a lot, and check out freelaunchcomics.com for more.